Hello guys and welcome back to HJW Gaming, bringing you my week 2 update of our current Tactics Evolved server, and it looks like it's hotting up to be an absolute cracker. Now, I left off at the end of my week 1 video, which if you haven't seen you can check out down on my channel along with a live stream of the first day, but I left that video off saying that showing like leaderboards and farming and things like that, and saying that the PvP was going to come very, very soon. And of course it has, and it's hotted up very, very quickly. So I'm just going to look to bring you kind of a guide day by day, how things have transitioned, where the fighting's been, and how things have panned out since then. Now, if you are enjoying this series, please smash the thumbs up. It'd be massively appreciated by me. And without further ado, straight into the update. So the first movers I want to talk about carries on pretty much straight away after the end of the last video. Now, I talked about how we'd kind of taken a pass very close to the end of the first week to move ourselves across into Rohan lands and farm that territory. And we were aware, of course, that the fellowship in that region, which was VSOP, were in line or in league with the opposition that we anticipated to come up against this season. So we were kind of getting an early leg up and taking while they weren't really prepared. And so we pushed across the Rohan region, aiming to kind of expand our farmland and gain our power, as of course we were pretty lacking in power because we've been trapped in a spawn region with 2 big fellowships in there. So we needed additional farmlands, and of course we needed to progress. So we pushed across into the Rohan lands to kind of aid that kind of area, and we anticipated that our enemies would also push us in the same area. Whilst we didn't find that much opposition at the time from VSOP, bar a little bit of kind of blocking reinforcement routes and things like that, they didn't really try and defend the pass, for example, but they did kind of block reinforcement routes where possible, and that was about it, kind of guerrilla warfare style. What we did see is that this pass in the north, Fire and Neon, the team in the northwest, pushed down towards us. So they captured Orthanc not too long after we took that pass, and they then continued to move south, and they captured this pass here with the intention of pushing down across into Rohan, at which point we had moved across into this choke point here and were pushing up, which is where we met Fire for the first time, Fire and Neon, and were therefore scrapping across this kind of choke point. The issue we initially had at this point was that we were fighting with kind of around 2 hour long reinforcement times. You can see I put a tactical fort up for exactly this reason, to try and reduce those kind of reinforcement times. But yeah, we basically went to war with Fire in this area. So you can see from this video taken at the time kind of the progress that we made. We pushed through this kind of narrow gap that was being defended, and we then continued to push further north with the intention of cutting off the pass that our opposition were of course coming through. And you can see at this point we're kind of at war. There's several crossings they're kind of trying to cut across and take our warfare. But overall, it was Fire and Neon up against Home and Mine, and we did kind of successfully push this area. I think it took a day, maybe 2 or 3, to push our way through here. Lots of tiles, very, very strong opponents. But you can see how well set up they were. Tons of forts also relocated into the area. So we were a little bit of a disadvantage initially with big long reinforcement times, but once we managed to get players relocated down there, get plenty of tactical forts up, we started to see good progress. So we pushed through the north, and we did eventually come through and clear all this out. You can see how many keeps they had to begin with. It did take a little while to kind of clear through this, and we tried to relocate as many as we possibly could, as of course, if those who aren't aware, the updates to the game nowadays, there's a massive cost now. I think it's about 1 million resources to rebuild your keep. So basically, if you get relocated, it does cost you long term. The way we kind of pushed through is, as we were fighting along this kind of main front, we actually pushed across and took this crossing here, because the opponents were using this to flank us and come down a crossing down the other side. So instead we pushed along, took this crossing which we could choke off, so prevent that flank, and then allow our team to fully focus on the main front. The benefit we had from doing so was that we were able to continue to move further and further forward up and almost get the flank route on the opposition instead, because whereas they were able to blanket cover these tiles and do a lot of very strong defense, they couldn't also protect the flank, and this flank takes us all the way around to where all their settlements were located. So we came up round using kind of their own flank against them here and pushed up, and as you can see by the number of forts we have here, we did successfully relocate, and we also were able to recapture the pass. And so the intention of all this was basically to do as much damage prior to the Season Chapter 8 finishing. Now, Season Chapter 8, the reason why that's important is that the passes into the central regions don't become active up until Season Chapter 8 is progressed. So basically we had to try and force the opponent away from, obviously, our resources as well, but also from having another front that they could push us on. So we had to kind of push them away from there prior to Chapter 8 finishing, which we successfully did by capturing this pass, in which case we then pushed in and relocated quite a few other players. Of course, we then pulled away when Season Chapter 8 came around. As soon as Chapter 8 came around, of course, things went a little bit mental. Now, we, of course, relocated up to our pass, which was with the Undeeps, as you can see here. And we took this as soon as it became available from chapter progression at 8 UTC. So we basically wanted to kind of get pushed in as soon as possible and do as much as get as far as we can in here, and also open up those additional resources and try and form kind of defensive positions where we possibly could. We then moved on and took the other pass with Mine. We took this at 1 UTC. Of course, it's difficult as well because it's a second pass with 100 level 45 armies. At this point, most of our armies are barely progressed beyond the 40s. So it's kind of hell of a job to try and take down a second full pass. This is 200 level 45 armies we've taken down now and nearly 2 million siege. But then we realised we had another issue. So DSAL immediately took their pass as well, and they fought it immediately straight towards us and pushed us as hard as possible through the eastern tunnel. Meanwhile, Fire and Neon immediately came through the western tunnel and did the same from the western side. So we realised we were kind of a little bit stuck in the middle here. You can see at this point there's around 17, 18 million worth of pin going on at the same time. So we had to take Undeeps, and this is recorded on that same day. So we took Undeeps at the same time, which is another 100 level 45 armies, along with another almost million siege. Now, at the same time, both teams were encroaching on our area massively. DSAL pushed all the way down here. You can see where we've got a couple of temporary camps. They actually did remove a ton of temporary camps that we already had building at this time. They pretty much pushed up as far as you can see here as to where Carl and Zorro are. They pushed this far forward, and Fire had pushed all the way down the western flank. So you can see all the way down here as well, they've relocated a few players. So, of course, whilst we're taking the Undeeps, we're taking heavy losses on this side. But we figured we had to do so and try and get the Undeeps to get that kind of kingdom protection and try and get some kind of advantage our way. You can see now at the time of this recording, we did manage to push ourselves back. Of course, as soon as we took Undeeps, we then pushed straight back, Mine to the west, home to the east on DSAL, and we pushed them back pretty much straight away. Now, there is, of course, a central region into the Undeeps as well, which comes through Amon Lank, and Fire and Neon are also progressing through this area. So we currently have 3 different areas that we're having to fight on at the minute. Meanwhile, at the same time, VSOP have kind of carried on being a nuisance, and with us moved away from fighting Fire and Neon down here, they've been able to kind of regroup a little bit and are now taking keeps and taking resources of ours in this area. So we're kind of being hit from 4 different areas at the minute by 5 to 6 different fellowships. So it's really tough at the minute, but we're just trying to do what we can to kind of keep a foothold in this server, as you can see. And that's kind of where I'm going to cut across to present day. So that's how we've moved across that week. You'll see now, I'll show you how things have moved. So we're still fighting around Amon Lank, trying desperately to kind of cling on to our grips of the Undeeps. I'll talk about DSAL first off, and I think they've just made a really big push, which they have. So we're still kind of trying to contain them around this crossing. Of course, we can't really push on and try and uproot all this lot without taking a lot of soldiers away from the other front. So it's like a delicate balancing act at the minute. But you can see there's a ton of forts players here. So we've got one kingdom attacking us from this side, which isn't obviously ideal. And you can see there's a lot of armies usually here coming and fighting us. The worst news, however, comes on the western front, and this is where Fire and Neon have primarily been pushing through. Earlier today, they pushed through with a big coordinated push and have driven us back. You saw we had this kind of contained at the start of the week. Towards the end of the week, they've now pushed through, and you can see they're making significant progress down the undeeps, and they've uprooted several players as they go. We've kind of done whatever we can to try and stop them. You see we've kind of held them to this area at the minute, but the problem we've got is they're still making progress as they go, and of course with only 2 fellowships here, there's a limit to what we can do when you're being hit by, well, in this case, 4 different fellowships in the central region. They've also been fighting a lot around this kind of central area. We've rebuffed them a bit today, but they have pushed us back significantly. We had gotten up to, I think it's one of the crossings near Amon Lank, a bit further up here. I think we'd pushed all the way around here, but they've now pushed us back. And they took the tunnel earlier on. We've now pushed our way back and got a little bit of kind of a defensive structure in this area. So it's a really hard balancing act because we're just about holding this tunnel here with DSAL. Obviously at the minute they've pushed on, but hopefully we'll be able to push back and get that defense area back in. We're defending the kind of middle, but we don't quite have enough to also defend the west at the same time. There's just a bit too much for us to do all in one go at the second, so it's really, really tough. Meanwhile, also you've got down, of course, I mentioned in the southwest, VSOP have reformed their kingdom and have started pushing us and taking away, obviously, our forts and pushing our resources. From what I believe, their intention is essentially to push across the Rohan lands, taking keeps as they go, Langstrand, Edhelond, but their main goal is to push up through the pass at the Wold, so they can then join this central fight and kind of hit us down from below as well. So yeah, we're soon going to have 3 kingdoms from 3 different directions fighting us, basically fighting us, and we're going to have to try and spread ourselves pretty thin to try and make defence on here. So yeah, it's really, really tough at the second. Other map movements to kind of talk about. We have seen SOSR re-emerge a little bit in the northwest. They've kind of pushed on, as of course Fire and Neon, as you've seen, have been fully focusing us. They pushed into SOSR's land early on. They are a Season 2 fellowship, so I think it was to kind of gain experience and try and level up on them. The problem is now, of course, they've made enemies of them, and they have seen significant pushback, because whilst Fire and Neon are fighting with us, they're kind of left unattended in their area, and they've been able to reform kingdom, and now you see today they've also taken Eton Moors and a capital in Carn Durm. So yeah, there's kind of significant pushback now happening up here, and obviously this is a little bit of a kind of a hope line for us, of course, as you can hope that the other fellowships that don't get on with our opponents will then push and try and take a little bit of the weight off of us. Meanwhile, in the east, there's also the Apes. So we are officially now allied with the Apes. So they've been working with us. They've come into Mordor to try and gain some farmland after DSAL. Of course, while we were fighting in the southwest, DSAL and NEON pushed their land and pushed into their land and took some of their farms. So they've been trying to rebuild, but they're scrapping a little bit and trying to get out of their spawn land, as you can see around here. The problem at the minute is they're not like massive full team in comparison to some of the others. They're still 2 strong teams, but you'll see when I look at fellowship rankings, they're not kind of in that kind of top 6 territory, but they're doing everything they can to try and push back through. And it looks like they're currently trying to take a pass to then open up a front with DSAL and NEON. So hopefully, again, something like that would help take the pressure and alleviate it away from us in the centre. So we've just got to kind of cling on and hope that something like that can help us. So yeah, this is what the map looks like at the minute. I said in my last video that the problem with kind of 6 standout fellowships being at the top of the fellowship rankings is whichever 2 ally together is going to majorly imbalance the server. And of course, it was never really going to be us that did that allying, I think, because if we did, it would have really, really imbalanced the server, I think. Probably would have been the worst outcome for everyone and would have formed like an unassailable alliance. So thankfully, so obviously we didn't do that. Problem is, of course, it kind of then leaves the other two to ally against you and form kind of a mega alliance coming up against you, which was always going to happen. Don't get me wrong, we kind of understood that was going to happen. But it just means it's really, really tough trying to rebuff opponents that are so strong. And credit to all of our opponents. They're obviously playing this, they're playing to win, and they're doing everything they can to get it, and they are fighting tough and hard all the way through. And we've seen fights across the map, literally pretty much all four corners there's been fights going on. And this server could swing either way still. So there's a lot to a lot to thank on this one, a lot to see progress as the server goes on. To talk through a couple of reports here and there, kind of show some of our opponents and kind of what they've got going for them. Now there are some really tough opponents, and Mazai here is one of them. You'll see on the leaderboards his production is kind of way out in front of everybody else's, and it's no surprise when you see the formation here. This is actually probably one of my better reports against him. We've been playing around with a couple of different troop formations during this season to try and find the best balance for us. Of course, with Tactics Evolved, you've got the interesting elite tactics that you have to follow as well. So the kind of troop meta is a little bit different within Tactics Evolved. So we've tried various different things. This is kind of a mix between medium and small. We're now running more of like a large to medium build based off what our opponents are using. But you can see Mazai here, we're at pretty much the same level, but he is lost quite a bit of his army, and we still weren't able to fully take him down. If we take a look, obviously very strong opponent. They use their gear very well. Undying, of course, being huge. So Fire mainly as a team are a team that's come out of Evil roleplay servers, and this is their first endeavour into non-roleplay. So a lot of their strongest will be Evil, of course, commanders. So you'll see that here with Undying, of course, being one of the strongest and most meta comms at the minute, particularly because of how strong his evasion is when used with the Mountain Trolls. Lovely Undying here, very high unit defense, very high command. We see similar here with the Zenith 12 Sauron, running again very high command, very high unit defense, this time with Marauders, but also a pretty decent amount of focus as well for a Sauron. But the main thing here is that command is just so tanky, which you can see Undying and Sauron basically here just would not die as a result of that very high unit defense, very high command. Dealing the damage, though, you can see the highest damage in this battle was actually dealt by his Saruman. Here, dealing with Zenith 11 Saruman. Interestingly, our opponents build their commanders in my opinion, a very strong way. Slightly different to how you normally see a Saruman built. Quite often people go full focus for that maximum damage. Here, running very high unit defense and very high command as well, with good use of the Cask of the Submerged Isle and the High Elf Hauberk in combination with that Law of the Arcane set effect, means that actually Saruman still has over 200 focus, so can deal a good amount of damage, as you saw from that 110k damage. Still has incredible use of his crowd control in his toolbox, but he's also incredibly tanky with that over 200 command and very high unit defense as well. So very difficult to defeat, and you'll see similar with the Lurts as well. I think it's an interesting meta shift that we're seeing. It's something that at the start of 2.0 wasn't particularly prevalent. People usually maxed attack or focus based around damage, but we're now seeing either the chest piece or the helm, or in some of these cases both, switching towards command and unit defense pieces, as long as you can get your attack above a certain threshold, usually over around 200, or focus, of course, if it's a focus commander. If you can get it over that whilst still having good command gear, quite often this is the preference when you hit this kind of top level team. So yeah, fully refined unique, as you can see here. Very difficult, very strong opponent, and yeah, someone who's definitely been a challenge as we've gone through this server. Is of course the problem with being so difficult to defeat is he is also out leveling all of us as he takes down more armies than most in PvP. We have seen some success facing them as well. We had a good report early on here with Lyre, who uses actually a very similar team to myself. Of course, the difference being that it's the Evil RP version, so he uses Skullhelm instead of Dane Ironfoot, and Undying, kind of where we'd use Gandalf the White, or perhaps a lot of good sides would use Gil-galad instead. But yeah, still use the Shadow and Sauron, very similar to us. And you can see we had a great report here very early on with very similar levels that kind of got us underway. And then we also had a follow-on in the same battle, which I actually think is not too bad of a report. We didn't have full army, but we still managed to take down around 4k of our opponent's army, despite the fact that I think we're quite heavily respect and gear out-leveled. So here you'll see using again Undying, which is a very popular commander, as I said. Using the Shadow, similar to us, this time at Zenith 1, again using very good use of that command and unit defense to make the Shadow go from his usual very squishy self to actually a reasonably tanky build, and still having pretty high attack and high focus for that Black Numenorian skill as well. So yeah, very, very strong. We're seeing a lot of Saruman as well. Of course, Saruman recently has kind of become the meta commander. Reason being is his multiple instances of damage make him very useful, like the Shadow, to shred through white counts as quickly as possible. And also he has crowd control in there as well as very high damage. So yeah, and again, similarly, you're seeing unit defense and command, unit defense and command. So very interesting shift here. We might have to look towards building a Saruman ourselves at some point, as he's just so formidable as an opponent at the minute. And then we're seeing the odd Sestaro poke up as well. This one here, Zenith 1. Not a lot to say, just a good focused damage dealing commander, but you can see I think this is a pretty good report for us, especially considering our Gandalf the White was basically completely pointless, as when the opponent runs Sestaro, Saruman and Shadow, that White Council probably lasted less than a round. So yeah, not too bad of a report from us. Dane putting out pretty decent damage here at 98k. I think actually Shire Protectors probably helped him out a long way along that, being able to shift the damage kind of onto other commanders, let them die and keep dealing the damage ourselves. But looking at our gear, I think we might need to look towards swapping potentially a Berserker's Raiment out for something kind of more unit defense, potentially even the Cask of Pride, and swapping that out and then swapping his weapon for an Axe of Khazad-dûm. But that's something we'll kind of have to explore depending on what kind of gear we get as we progress through our server. Of course, we've progressed on quite a long way since then, so what do our more recent reports look like? Now, we've had some pretty decent ones in the last half hour or so. So this is some reports we've had trying to defend that kind of Western Front, as I said, up against Neon and Fire. We had a great report here up against Aga from Neon. We do hold something of a level advantage, but it's still great to see Dane Ironfoot outputting that 180k damage, which is pretty huge from him. Again, still running the same gear. Only difference to what you saw earlier is I have gained some more respect items, so he is now R13. But again, still running our Warcry set, maximum attack, but doing well, 180k damage. We have actually shifted to using Entings on here as well, in an attempt to try and curb that damage we're taking from Saruman, Sestaro, sometimes Witch King and things like that. But we're seeing a lot of focused damage dealers. So I've tried to switch to Entings to see how that does, and it seems to be working out pretty well so far. You'll see the Saruman here reduced to kind of 26k, so we do get a pretty comprehensive victory, and I think that comes down to the mix of the Entings being a large unit and also curbing that focus damage, and we probably got a little bit lucky with crowd control skills as well. So yeah, great output here. We then followed that on with a draw with Anatar from Fire here, again running kind of that evil RP team. This time going with 3 damage dealers with Lurtz, Shadow and Scowhelm. I'm always happy when I don't see a Saruman, as I'm absolutely sick of the sight of them. But yeah, strong team here again, Ascended Sauron as well as Ascended Lurtz as well. We do have something of a gear advantage here, but we had a little bit of a troop disadvantage, but still great output here from Dane Ironfoot, 140k, and this actually considering we had kind of the inverse of the last fight we saw, in that the Entings as a large unit actually were disadvantaged against the 2 Guardians on our opponent's Lurtz and Shadow. But but whenever he hit the 2 large units, being the Eagles and the Mountain Troll, he would have dealt kind of neutral damage. But a good report here, considering we were we were kind of half, maybe 2/3 army to kind of take the opponent out of the fight as well. And 2 huge damage numbers of over 100k here from our 2 damage dealers. I can't really ask a lot more than that. Of course, we got zeroed very, very shortly after. And then our most recent report will be the last one I show. Taking a bit of a defeat here, or technically a draw, but obviously troop number wise this is a defeat, especially considering our opponent was using 2 different tier 2s. So resource wise this is a reasonably large defeat for us, but still getting some good damage numbers in with Dane nearing that 140k. Again, that'll be down to those large units up against the 3 medium units our opponent's using, getting the counter buff. Shadow with neutral units, so no counter buff again, getting over 100k. So we're getting pretty consistent over 100k from both our damage dealers, which is always great. We could just really do with an upgrade on our Sauron here. His gear really with purple gear is not up to scratch in this kind of level of server. And of course, running kind of R6 comms when we're coming up against Zeniths all the time isn't really up to snuff either. But there's not a lot we can do here apart from continue to hope that we get a little bit lucky with invitations and pull some great gear. The most gutting thing for me is I did have a ton of Cask of the Submerged Isles moving into 2.0, but thinking that they were a bit useless and being a bit naive to how the upgrade mechanics were, I did actually burn a lot of them into worn out items, which was massively wasteful and obviously I regret that massively now. But you see our opponent's team, Z3 Undying, Z1 Shadow, R11 Scowhelm with Unique, and then Saruman, of course, as well here at R10. And again, another lovely build here. Very high damage. But I think we did reasonably well. I think, all in all, I'm quite happy with that, considering I think there's quite a discrepancy here in gear and respect level. So I think I'm quite happy with that kind of final report. Now, leaderboards to finish up. You can see, as I kind of mentioned earlier, Mazai's miles out in front here with 80k here. I don't know how it's quite got so much, but his resource base must just be 300 tiles and nothing else. But yeah, great production here with an incredible team. I think he's also ahead on the commander leaderboard, which we'll get to in a minute. But yeah, production-wise, we're not doing too bad personally. We're here on 29th, so doing reasonably okay. We've kept our production up pretty well. We've dropped off our workshops now as well, and then we replace that just with standard level 8 tiles and level 9s where we can, just to make sure we've got higher production. This is a little bit misleading maybe because we've had to pick up a lot of stone tiles, so our production isn't fully productive, is the best way to put it. But still decent production, so we're still keeping up troop numbers and able to use kind of our large units for now until of course our resource starts being hit. But yeah, 29th, not too bad. You can see there's a lot of opponents above us, however, drawing on that large resource base to do a lot of damage to us. Merit-wise, we're doing pretty well as well. Inflagranti's just taken up top place for power, and I think that's fighting in that kind of, I think I mentioned about them taking the pass, so I think that fight's pushed him above 1 million merit, so congratulations at the minute for them. Jim Raz and Mazai, and unsurprisingly, top for fire. They've been very, very difficult opponents so far. You'll see them on the commander leaderboard in a moment. Rick Frab as well from Neon. Again, another one of our opponents. And we see our kind of first home player here in 5th with Shield Maiden Lagertha. And you can see it's quite a mixed bag here. It's pretty small gaps between a lot of these players. So it means that basically all of these fellowships are very, very active and fighting pretty much all the time. We've got ourselves up into the top 50. We were a little bit delayed at the start of the server, as kind of that initial fighting with VSOP was, of course, undertaken by Mine, as they were the ones that took the pass on that side. So we were a little bit behind at the beginning, but once we started fighting with Fire and Neon, we did get involved with that tactical fort as soon as possible, and we've now moved ourselves up to 46th place, and we have been climbing day on day, so I wouldn't be surprised if we moved our way up over the next few days, because we're going to have to make sure we stay active to hold those regions we have at the minute. Fellowship leaderboard as regards to production. Now this is where things get interesting. You'll see DSAL are at the top. They've recently taken first place and kept on pushing on. They haven't... we've dropped down pretty heavily, as of course VSOP have been taking a lot of resource from us in that kind of Rohan region, so Home sits in 2nd. We then have Fire in 3rd with Mine in 4th. And then we have Neon just below them in 5th, and then DSAL's partner here, Heon, in 6th. And you can kind of see that currently it's production-wise, it's 1st, 3rd, 5th and 6th up against 2nd and 4th. So you can see production-wise why it's really tough to kind of try and keep up that fight, as we're not able to kind of overproduce our opponents. So if we take more and more losses, it's hard to keep those troops kind of pumping out. Below there we have SOSR, who are sitting in 7th and 9th, and they've pushed themselves up quite a lot higher recently, as they've kind of reclaimed that northwest land, as we said. And then we have kind of our allies there with Power in 8th and Apes in 11th, doing what they can to kind of take some of the strain off and fight against 1st and 6th, being that Pink Kingdom. So you can see why there's a little bit of a struggle there, as production-wise the two of them combined is only just more than DSAL on their own. So it's a little bit of a struggle to try and kind of make up that advantage. And then we also have VSOP, as you see here in 10th, who of course are also one of our opponents. So yeah, not easy when 5 of the top 10 are fighting against us. But we do what we can, and we'll keep up the good fight, and I'll keep you kind of posted as we go through. I'm hoping to try and stream a little bit more in the coming week and kind of show myself battling on some of these fronts, as long as we don't get pushed back too far. Commander leaderboard, we're actually pretty high. We've dropped from where I was expected to be. We're 14th a little bit earlier on. So but you'll see, as I said, Mazai out in front at the minute with his Zenith 11 Saruman, which is an absolute bane of our life, dealing a hell of a lot of damage. Highest commander level on the server at 47. There's then Jin Raz from Fire with his Sestaro at Zenith 7. Undying here at Zenith 4. And then Shadow at Zenith 6. And of course that kind of combination is so phenomenal against our kind of Gandalf the Whites and things like that, and White Council, because you've got 3 commanders there, Shadow, Undying, Saruman, that deal so many instances of damage that you just shred through White Council so quickly. So yeah, tough opponent. The first kind of home player popping up here is Shield Maiden Lagertha here with her Zenith 3 Sestaro, doing great work there. We're seeing a lot of Evil comms here, and I think Evil really is starting to take over and dominate the meta from what I can see from the most recent servers we've played. Particularly Undying, I think, has kind of come out of nowhere to be a really strong commander. First kind of good side comm we see here is Mine Ghosts. Dane Ironfoot, here's R15 Dane here, very strong, huge attack here in 262. But I guess this is where our team potentially should try and shift things up a little bit, is potentially something like a Cask of the Submerged Isle. Would dropping that in for the Cask of Pride would probably keep Ghost at still very high damage. You know, he'd have over 220 attacks still, but he'd have very high command and very high unit defense as well. Maybe that's where we need to look to shift to kind of adjust to the changing meta. Yeah, we're sat in 16th at the minute, just with our little baby Dane sat around all the Zeniths at the minute, which is a brutal company to be in. But yeah, we're doing pretty well overall, I think. And the main thing is just going to be kind of trying to contain these pushes the best we can. Whilst we've been recording, we have taken another hit and another very tough hit. And this is the problem when you're taking a lot of very damaging L's here, which this is a bad one. Again, fighting against Zenith comms when we don't have Zenith level comms is really tough. We're going to take a lot of losses, but we're kind of having to just take it, resupply, go again over and over again. So yeah, tough one here. But we're going to have to try and hold out on all fronts. We have 2 opponents that are very similar level to us, both hitting us from 2 sides. So we just have to do what we can strategically to try and make things work more in our favour potentially. Yeah, that's the kind of final map view. Hopefully you guys have enjoyed this video and the kind of talk through. I'll keep running things through as they shift. To be honest, they're probably going to shift down this way, if I'm going to be honest, how things look. But hopefully not too badly so. But I'll keep you guys updated as the server progresses. Anyway, if you guys have enjoyed this update, please drop a like on it. And I'd really appreciate that. And I'll definitely catch you on the next one.